Thank you very much for tuning in to CEC Gurukul lectures on bioinformatics. In the first lecture, in the introductory lecture on science of bioinformatics, we talked about several components of bioinformatics, and where the first important component was the biological databases. So, we'll take that into details in this lecture, but I like to start with something funny. This is a small cartoon, and in a funny way I am just trying to depict that there exists a gap between the understanding of a biologist and the software professionals. Like the way software people have advanced the information is a bit little difficult for some of the biologists, though present day bioinformaticians, they know a lot, but it was just I just like to focus that it's a science which is again mixing up biology with software engineering. Going further, I said we'll be talking about biological databases. So I like to say that biological or a general database is a collection of information, and this information can be, if we want to keep some picture in our mind, we can understand this as tables, several tables, or it is also stored as rows in the tables, and the tables may be linked to each other or may not be linked to each other. It could be as simple as the phone book we have, because that also stores the information about names, addresses, etc. And it can be very sophisticated as a biological repository which has terabytes of data. So this can be very simple, and the database is a way to store information. It might be working on a standalone system, meaning one computer, one server, one storage. It may be a network of computers where we have one central server and lots of users of that information. It could be stored in cloud, meaning we have remote servers and on the internet to store rather than it being present in the system. So that is about the three ways to store. And coming to the definition of biological databases, if we got to define biological databases, they are typical computational databases which contain all type of biological information collected from scientific experiments, published literature, high throughput experiment technology, and computational analysis. So this includes biological information that is coming from scientific experiments, or maybe from published literature or high throughput technology, and it might also be coming from the analysis of the primary information which is coming out as a result of research, direct research in the laboratory. So also we must know about the biological database. The important thing about this is that it works with a computerized software, and that allows us to query the data, update the data, and retrieve the information stored in the system, meaning in the database. So apart from being this information store, the interesting or the important feature of this is that it allows us to update, query, and retrieve the components of the data stored within the system. So let's start with today's class. That was just I was trying to make a background that what we'll be talking today. So we'll be talking about biological databases in details, and I would like to cover this under 4 subheadings. One is history of biological databases, then the unique features which these biological databases have, then maybe what are the different types of biological databases, and the data retrieval systems. So this lecture, these subheadings also I took from the CBCS syllabus. So it just goes by according to the syllabus. So first talking about the history and growth of biological databases. So, in the history started the way the history of bioinformatics started. This was Dr. Margaret Dayoff. She developed an atlas of protein sequences, meaning she started collecting sequences and she tried to assemble these sequences, and she also developed a matrix for evolutionary studies with these sequences. But here in the biological databases, she is credited with development of protein information resource. Even now it is used, but she started working with protein sequences and assembling those sequences. Then next we had Amos Baruch, and what did he do? Of course, Dr. Margaret started assembling the sequences, but Amos Baruch, what did he do is he started he started to annotate these sequences, meaning he started to give name to these sequences, meaning what might be the structure of these sequences, what may be their pathological roles, and tried to adapt those to the computational databases, meaning he thought the computers, if we bring in computers in between, it is really going to enhance the work. Then this attitude and this way of working gradually gave birth to SwissProt, that is the curated, annotated protein sequence database, meaning the annotation was the most important feature which was added here. Apart from this, he added the computer softwares and functioning here, and the third important thing which he did is he tried to distribute this information, this database, as magnetic tapes, meaning in 1986 we didn't have this internet and the other ways to share the information, but he tried to share this on magnetic tapes. So Amos also gave it a very good direction, the databases. Then in this era we were starting with the genome sequencing projects, and there was huge multiplication of the data. I just would like to show you this diagram or this graph, which is showing you the exponential growth of data from 1990 to 2010. Just because, if a genome is sequenced, it has huge information stored in that, and we got to have methods to manage this information. So this is just showing the number of entries in UniProt or SwissProt database over 1990 to 2010. Another important event which happened in the history, which led to the further growth of these databases, was the automation and the cheap, meaning easy methods of sequencing. Lloyd M. Smith developed the first automated DNA sequencer, and what happened with this DNA sequencer was that it was very easy and it was not costly to sequence any DNA. So if you are sequencing a genome, what is happening is you are creating huge information, and this automation of genomics led to about 43-fold increase in the sequences or increase in the information. So that got to be diverting to the computer side. Then there was one more important contribution, that was Dr. Walter Goat, and he has been credited with building a database for nucleic acid sequences, and even now that sequences are used as GenBank. So that was it, and this success led to the groundwork for the Human Genome Project. Then came the time of genome sequencing, and the first genome sequenced was of Haemophilus influenza, and this was sequenced and the database was developed for this genome, and it was it could not have been done otherwise. We had 1.8 million base pairs and 1743 genes, and though the Haemophilus is supposedly a smaller genome, so that led to multiplication of data, and we needed to develop methods to analyze this data, study this data, annotate this data. So things went further. So but we had a consolidated things happening, and we had huge data, and we reached to the present day databases. And the present day situation is what? Is that Nucleic Acid Research, a very prestigious journal in molecular biology, it comes out with a yearly issue of its journal. Like in 2018, this journal reported that we have about 180 databases existing now, and they are getting updated every time. So this is the present scenario, and if anybody wants to look at the or check the present day status, he can grab this journal, Nucleic Acid, and can have a look there that what is happening. Like I tell you, in 2020, what is this Nucleic Acid Research saying? It published 148 papers, and it included 59 papers which reported new databases. So you can very well imagine the growth of these databases, and the 79 papers covered the recent changes in the resources of the previously published databases. So 59 papers cited 59 papers cited new databases, and 79 covered the change in the previously existing databases. That is the present day scenario for the databases. So I have finished with the first segment. There I was talking about the history and growth of these databases. Where have we reached, and what are the what is the present status of information about these databases. So if we go further, we would first study the that is the next section, that what are the important features of these biological databases. So let's start with these features. The first one here is that they are truly computational databases, meaning they have all the properties of these computational databases. That means they have structured data, they are searchable, they are updated periodically, and they are cross referenced. So they are typical computational databases and with all the properties, and the structured data makes it the most important and a specialized one. What happens in case of structured data? The structured data is clearly defined data type, whose pattern makes them easily searchable. So the structured data makes it searchable, and that is the most important feature of these computational databases. It can be of several types, like typical computational databases. It may be a personal database on my laptop, it can be a cloud database, as I told you earlier, not in the cloud but in the internet. It may be a relational database, so it can be of any type like the computational database. Then the next feature about these databases is that we have data heterogeneity possible. Now what is this data heterogeneity? Means we can enter any type of data, like in the tables you can enter that as a text, as a number, or as a byte. So if we talk in terms of biology, our data can be a sequence data like DNA, RNA, or amino acid sequence. It can be a graph like in metabolic pathways. It can be high dimension data like microarray data. It could be the structure of the proteins, 2D structures, 3D structures, structures of nucleic acid. It may be a temporal data, that is protein structure dynamics, meaning we can study the dynamics also. Suppose I was just working with the hemoglobin protein at Jawaharlal Nehru University, and there in Department of Biotechnology, what we used to do is that for a protein, if we are studying, and we can model it by the hydrogen ions if they are added, and meaning this dynamic or this temporal data can very easily be generated with these databases. Then we can also have the data as patterns in the gene sequences and expression. So we'll take all of them once again, but here we are talking about their features, and we said the database can be in any shape, any form here, and these 6 were the common forms. Then going further, the third important feature of these biological databases is same as the computational databases, that we have data curation. Now, what is data curation? Data curation is the organization and integration of data collected from various sources. So, what we do in curation is we annotate the data, we can publish it and present in different forms, and it is done in such a way that it can be maintained over time, and we can reuse and preserve this data. So, that all comes in data curation. Next important feature of these biological databases is they have true database environment like we have for any computational database, and the 4 major components of the database environment are data, the software, that is database management system. It may be people like database administrator, programmers, or maybe the end users. It may be procedures. Procedures are the instructions and the rules for the databases. So, these 4 things makes the component of a database environment, and I have just depicted the same thing again here in the form of a picture. Maybe like there are persons like programmers or admins who mainly work with the application programs. Then we have DBMS, that is the softwares which basically control the design tools, like we create tables, we create forms, we create query. Then we have database, which is actually stored in the table, and I already told you that we can keep a picture of tables sort of things in our mind for database. And we also have user. User is seeing the interface which is being generated, and they actually use this database, meaning they have a query, they want to find out information, and they operate with the runtime languages. So, these are the main components of the databases. And if again, I am just trying to show you the RDBMS, which again consists of tables, but the tables here are related, meaning one table is linked to the other one. This is what happens in RDBMS. So, having said this, I hope we had a good impression and a good understanding about the databases, computational databases, what to keep in our mind when we go further as a biologist. The next feature is that we have large scale integration and sharing possible with these databases, and these databases are dynamic in nature, meaning they keep changing with time. We can change the information stored in them with time. And lastly, the last feature of biological databases is the format, sequence format, is that they contain the information in a particular format, and there is a permitted layout and the content in the text file. And what are these formats? Basically covering the text tokens used to define the fields used in the database. Like, say for example, I have taken FASTA format here for an example, and what is the main feature in FASTA format is that it always starts with the greater than sign. And in the first line, in the greater than sign, we have the description of the protein which we are talking. And this is a crab crystalline protein, alpha chain, and after that is followed is basically the sequence, amino acid sequence, and you have the same format whatever sequence you have. It may be a very big sequence, what may be a small sequence. So, in these databases, the sequence formats are quite important, and the system will not work if we don't follow the proper sequence formats. So, that was about the features of these biological databases. So, I will quickly summarize. What did we learn about these biological databases here is that they are truly computational in their properties. They have data heterogeneity. Data can be in any form: DNA sequence, RNA sequence, 2D 2D shape, 3D shape, or maybe metabolic pathway. It can be anything. Data curation, where we annotate the data and we integrate the data. And the data environment has main 4 components, that is database, software, admins, and the users. The data is a result, database is a result of large scale integration of data and sharing, and it is of dynamic nature. We have proper formats in the sequences. So with that one, I have finished with the section 2 of our talk, and I was just talking that they have a particular format. So going further, we will talk about the classification of these biological databases. How do we classify these biological databases? Is first, we can classify them on the basis of sequences they contain. So if they contain a nucleic acid sequence, we would say they are nucleic acid databases. If they contain protein sequences, we can say they are protein sequence databases. If they are DNA sequence database, we say them DNA sequence. If they are RNA sequence database, we say they are RNA sequence databases. Then I just thought I'll take some examples of these DNA sequence databases. Like for DNA sequence databases, the most common example is GenBank, and here is a web view of GenBank, which I have just thought it will be good if we see that. And this GenBank is sequence database, which is an open access annotated collection of all publicly available nucleotide sequences and their protein translations. It is maintained and produced by NCBI, and I already said it is a very common, most popularly used nucleic acid sequence database, DNA sequence database. So if we come to RNA sequence databases, RNA Central is the common example, and it contains the known coding RNA sequences in them, and all information about the known coding RNA sequences. If we talk of protein sequence databases, UniProt becomes the most common one, and it has merged itself with SwissProt. So SwissProt and UniProt nowadays is the same. So what do they contain is they are curated protein sequence database, which strives to provide a high level annotation such as description of protein, maybe its domain structure, its post translation modification, variants, etc. So not only it gives you sequence, but it gives you all other information like annotation, function also. So the next type of database, earlier we were talking about the sequence databases, now we will talk about the structure databases, and the most popular one here is RCSB PDB database. And what is this? The picture of COVID-19 which I showed you in the last lecture was taken from this. So most of the 3-dimensional pictures of proteins and nucleic acid structures are they come from these protein data banks, and they store the all information about the 3D shapes of the proteins, nucleic acids, and complex assemblies that helps to understand all aspects of biomedicine and agriculture, meaning it includes all information from protein synthesis to health and diseases. And it's really interesting to work with this structure databases. Next we have genome databases. The genome database, again we have several types of genomes sequenced, and we store them in one database. Like I have just taken the example of yeast genome database here. This provides comprehensive integrated biological information for the budding yeast. And what you can do is you can search this database. Apart from searching, this has all analysis tools, and it also has tools so that we can discover the functional relationship between the sequence gene products in fungi, and we can relate these to the higher organisms. So that way it is a simple one. So I just picked up the simplest Saccharomyces cerevisiae database, yeast database. It's a representative of eukaryotic genome database. Then we also have bibliographic databases. What happens in bibliographic databases is they store the bibliographic, meaning all references, and it is quite like the Google search you do. So if you enter a keyword here, it will open up, let's say you entered mycorrhiza, so it will open up all the papers, research papers which cite mycorrhiza, and you can also search this by the author's name if you are interested in the author's name, and this is included in the practical syllabus. So most of the students, they are very comfortable with dealing with this PubMed and studying the research papers in here. So the next is metabolic pathway databases, and I hope I understand that everybody, like biologists, we've been studying these pathways for a long, Calvin cycle and H&Slack cycle, and these metabolic pathway database really are very helpful. We can trace some molecule from one pathway, how it is reaching to the other pathway. So that's a wonderful database for writing diagrams of molecular interactions, reactions, and pathways. And it's really interesting to work on this KEGG pathway database. Next is disease database. We have all the diseases stored in our databases, and we have all genetic and clinical annotation of these diseases. Like in this MELA cards, the human disease database, we have 21369 disease entries stored already, and this keeps changing. I told you they have dynamic nature. Then we have enzyme nomenclatural database. You can know the EC number or the class or cofactor, etc. of the enzymes, and this is coming from Swiss Prot, and you can have all information about the enzymes, the cofactor, and whatever you want to know about the enzymes. Then we have taxonomy databases. That is, if you want to know about the taxonomy, meaning which class, which order, which family any plant or animal is belonging to. But I like to highlight one thing here is the whatever existing the species of life on this planet, we just know 10% of that, and that 10% you can search in this taxonomy database. So summarizing this section, we talked about the types of databases, classification, and we said that databases can be sequence databases, they can be structured databases, genome databases, metabolic databases, bibliographic databases, disease databases, enzyme databases, and taxonomy databases. In the next section, we'll talk about another way to classify these databases. But before moving on to the next section, I am just leaving you with this cartoon once again, which tells you the funny state of affair. Like, we have the data, we can search the data, but this sort of situations also need to be handled. Thank you very much. I'll see you again.